they're claimed to be monopolies. Peter, you're the world's leading expert on monopolies, how they form, what they contribute, what their life cycle is. What do you think of this, all these huge fines for relatively trivial offenses, and the array of litigation against Facebook and Google and all these giant companies, these colossi that rule our world?
Well, I have to be, I always think one has to disclose one's biases when one speaks. And one of my biases, and one of the things that makes me somewhat careful in answering your question, is I'm on the board of Facebook, and so I have to be pretty careful how I answer your question here. But let me sort of give a somewhat indirect answer. There are obviously the big tech companies are facing, antitrust. There's sort of a lot of regulatory stuff. Europe is pushing a lot of tax-related things. There are privacy, data ownership issues. So there's sort of, and then of course there's sort of a lot of different levels on which they are under sort of cultural and political attack. And the way I understand what is, we sort of debate the merits, what parts of these criticisms are justified, what parts are not justified. I think the way I think of the context of why this is happening is, it's always a story where it's like, Silicon Valley did all these bad things. And I don't think that's the main story. I think the main problem Silicon Valley has is that it's not done enough good things. And the story that, again, picking on Google, that Google should be able to tell is, yeah, maybe there are all these things we're doing that are problematic in certain ways, but we've made the world a better place in all these other very important, very tangible ways. And that story has gotten harder and harder to tell. And I think that remains sort of the core challenge of Silicon Valley. On the specific merits of these questions, the way I believe Silicon Valley should defend itself. And again, I think there's a lot. Some of these criticisms are justified, and Silicon Valley needs to do a better job in many ways. But I believe that the core defense Silicon Valley should give against the accusations of being too big and too centralized in all these problematic ways is that the alternative to Silicon Valley, the practical alternative at this point, is perhaps not the crypto anarchist decentralization, but the most likely alternative is even more centralization in the form of Chinese communist tech companies, where where it's basically just one giant Borg-like thing that's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And so, if there's a problem with big tech, if it's too homogenized, too centralized, and so on, we have to be careful that we don't set up an alternative where it's even bigger and even more centralized and literally communist.
You started PayPal in part to overthrow this government monopoly of money. How's it going? And what can we hope for in the future in the cryptocosm?
It's a little bit harder than I thought in 1999. Certainly, I was very one of the books that tremendously influenced me when I started PayPal was The Sovereign Individual. It was written by Rees-Mogg, the father of Jacob Rees-Mogg, the British Brexit parliamentarian. And it was about how we're going to have cryptocurrencies, and it was going to be this decentralized world where sovereignty would get decentralized to the individual level. And I read that book in the summer of '98, and it sort of inspired me to start PayPal as this sort of libertarian project that was going to liberate people's money from the control of the central monetary authorities. And there was sort of a whole set of ideas we had around that. And in the context of PayPal, we certainly built a successful business, but that part of the vision turned out to be quite hard to do. And there were certainly forms of electronic money that, in theory, were decentralizing, and in practice enabled more centralization and more control. And especially after 9/11 and the Patriot Act, and all the ways that the regulatory state was able to more precisely track the flow of electronic money, that it may have actually trended quite the other way. Now, I think of I do think of Bitcoin as the real thing. It is this sort of it's sort of the centralized currency that we fantasized about at PayPal, but didn't quite build. I have all these speculative thoughts on who Satoshi is, and the Bitcoin origin story. And without stating precisely who I think it is, let me give what I think is the key origin story for Bitcoin. We were at this when I started PayPal. We were at this financial cryptography I went to this financial cryptography conference in Anguilla in early 2000, sort of an annual conference, and they have sort of this gathering of people who are libertarian and into cryptocurrencies, and probably a decent number of people working at the NSA and spying for the U.S. government and other governments as well. So it's sort of this rather interesting gathering of people. And my theory is that Satoshi was at that conference, or at one like that in early 2000, and that these ideas were germinated in the late 90s already. And one of the manifestations of cryptocurrency at that particular conference was a system called eGold, and it was anonymous encrypted electronic gold certificates. And it was a company. It was based in southern Florida. They had these servers distributed all over the planet, but it was in theory this gold-based alternative to the dollar. It was going to be encrypted and safe, and there were all these problems with eGold. We made it interoperable with PayPal. It turned out there was sort of a lot of criminal fraud, criminal activity. Maybe that's always part of the territory of these things. We sort of disconnected it. But the people who started it eventually got in a lot of trouble. The whole system was shut down. The company was targeted. They were prosecuted. I don't think they went to jail, but the whole thing was sort of disbanded. And there was something about the eGold architecture that was in theory a cryptocurrency, and in theory fairly decentralized, with their servers in Iceland and Dubai and one or two other places. But in practice, it was still centrally attackable by the larger central government. And I believe the true Bitcoin origin story was in contrast to eGold. It's almost the same name in a way. It's like eGold, Bitcoin. It has roughly the same. It's like you were thinking about eGold. Okay, I'm going to do the next eGold. I'm going to change E to Bit and coin to gold. It was sort of a contrast to that. And so I think the reason we do not know who Satoshi is integral to the history of Bitcoin. If we knew who it was, our too powerful central government would probably do some very unpleasant things to that person.
Why do you believe that the Communist Party of China could nurture or run giant companies with tremendous capabilities that actually are competitive with the best companies in the United States? How is it possible that a communist party can actually be a threat in this commercial, creative domain?
Well, I suppose I think these companies are a threat, and I think they are very tightly controlled by the Communist Party. So the counterpoint to it is that seems to me to be the empirical reality. I think the theoretical, so that's the empirical answer. The theoretical answer to your question is I don't think centralized totalitarian communism is that good at creativity. You did have good number theorists and good chess players in the Soviet Union, so there probably are certain forms of creativity you're able to have even in a Stalinist or Maoist system. But I don't think the creativity is essential, and the competitive threat from these companies in China is that they are just extremely fast at copying. They're very fast at copying things that work, and there's always, in any sort of creative business, there's a balance between the creative inspiration, what I call the 0 to 1, the miraculous beginning,
Yep.
and then scaling the business and building it. And I think in every area of technology and innovation, the United States and the West more generally are still at the cutting edge. We're still ahead. We're the only place in the world where innovation is really happening. But how much value it is to us depends on how quickly it gets transferred and exfiltrated to China. And so, the West developed the atom bomb in 1945, and that was, again, it was a form of innovation. It was that was possible in a free society. But within 4 years, once you had proven that it could be done, it could be copied even in the Stalinist Soviet Union. So copying is much easier to do than originating. And if you have no IP protection, if we have this sort of massive exfiltration of information and ideas, then the disadvantage is not that great for China, and they can be quite a big threat.
We have. How does your understanding? This is a question from the audience. Okay. How does your understanding of technology inform you about the current pulse of personal relationships and the broader social and societal fabric looks like now and into the future? You can talk forever, Peter. Any room for the human spirit in our futures?
Well, one would hope so. I think there are all sorts of unhealthy trends in our society and things that are very off, and certainly I think the way I understand the Jordan Peterson phenomenon is that it's not that he's correct about Jungian psychology, which I think is just ridiculous, but what's Peterson's been effective because Jungian psychology is a politically correct way to talk about the extremely dysfunctional gender relationships in the United States and the West. And so I think I agree with that premise of the question that there are some really big problems. I would disagree with the claim that it's mainly driven by technology. I mean, maybe there are aspects of tech, of the sort of constant attention distraction or things like that that are unhealthy and that are socially unhealthy. But I think I think it's actually driven by these things are overdetermined. There are many things that drive it, and my intuition for what's gone wrong in a lot of these cultural areas is just the sort of general sense of cultural malaise, of stagnation, of the future is not getting better. Our society is not progressing, and so when people retreat into playing video games or living in their parents' basements or staying in graduate school. It's probably maybe this is just like a I think the solution is maybe you should give them a Jordan Peterson like psychology lesson. Maybe you can tell them to turn off their iPhones or take away their iPhones. But I think the real structural thing is we have to get back to the future. We have to get back to growth in our economy generally.
Thank you.
That's at least always my bias.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, challenging opening to the conference, Peter. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You really set us up and challenged us, and we got a lot to do now. Thank you.
Next year, I'll try to do it in person. My apologies for the long distance, but thought we'd give it a try. Thanks.
Hey.
Thank you, Peter, to you and your team for making the time and effort to make that. We're going to take just a couple of minutes here.